All right, good evening, and welcome to this evening's Zoning Design and Review Board meeting for Tuesday, June 11th, 2013. Just a reminder for those individuals joining us for the first time, we'll pass right over that. For those at home, you can always watch us on the town's website at townofyountville.com. The meeting is live on Channel 28, and it is rebroadcast the following Friday, so that'd be this 14th at 10 a.m. When you're in the council chambers, please turn off your cell phone. It says pagers, I crossed that out. And we will go from there. So, Sandra, the first call to order. Roll call.
Member Gates.
Here.
Member Cook.
Here.
Vice Chair Scoggins.
Here.
Chair Durham.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Member James is excused.
Very good. Any questions or changes from anybody on the agenda? So will anybody move to adopt the agenda? So moved. Very good. And second? Excellent. As for the minutes from the last meeting, we will have those in the near future. We just do not have those available at the moment. Seeing nobody else in the audience, we'll go right over the public comment and no consent agenda. We will go straight to public hearing 7.1, design review and master sign plan amendment for Kelly's Fuel and Provisions. Sandra?
Good evening. Tonight you have before you design review for 3 new awnings at Kelly's Fuel and Provisions and a master sign plan amendment to add signage to each of those 3 awnings. And the Washington Square site is subject to a master development plan that allows a freestanding development sign at each of the frontages and either a wall or hanging sign for each of the businesses within that development. And Kelly's has been approved for a hanging sign on the east elevation, for a wall-mounted sign at the north end of the east elevation that faces north to Madison and south inward on the site. And there's also a window sign on the front door. With this application, the applicant is seeking to add approximately 4.2 square feet of signage to the north elevation. And the new awnings will be the same bright yellow color that's generally shown here. I have a better example of the material itself. And this is similar to the color that's used at the awnings or the umbrellas at R&D Kitchen. And then the copy on each of the awnings would be located on the valance, and it would list the general type of goods that the gas station and convenience store sells, including wine shop, filling station, and espresso. And there are generally 2 issues before you tonight. The one is in regards to the maximum number of signs that a business is permitted. And as I indicated in the staff report, since this is a corner business with frontage both on Washington and Madison, it's been granted approval for 2 signs, where most businesses would be granted approval for 1, and by this application they seek to increase the amount of signage. So the question is whether this is consistent with that requirement or not. And I do note that this type of signage has been permitted on other properties in town, and Summerston is an example where they have the Summerston business identification sign, but also descriptive terms for wine, art, and ranching, very similar to what the proposal is here. The other issue is the copy on the signs, and in this case, the generic terms for the 3 aspects of the business. And the rule for commercial signs is that you're generally limited to the name of the business, but if it's necessary for purposes of identification, you can include the general non-specific type of principal goods sold or services provided. And so you should have some discussion on the type of language that they want to use for wine shop, filling station, and espresso. From staff's perspective, the fact that it is a filling station is self-evident based on the location and the visibility at that corner. However, that's specifically an item for your discussion tonight. So we're recommending that you discuss the project, hear from the applicant, and then make a decision on the application.
Thank you, Sandra. Any questions of staff at the moment?
So existing sign is the large one, front and center facing Washington. And the little one that is on the drawing on the side is approved but not
Right.
there.
I should have mentioned that. It is approved,
Okay.
but it hasn't been installed. I understand that they're still interested in installing that sign.
But it hasn't been created yet?
We'll ask the applicant.
Yeah, we just have to pull the trigger.
Any other questions of staff?
I have one question. Hypothetically, if they removed the fueling station sign and just had, I think it's espresso and wine bar, would that be 2 signs in your mind, or is the 3 signs, or the 3 awnings what you're concerned about? Just to be
Well,
clear.
it's hard to put a number on the signs because they sort of read as a whole. They are new signs on this north elevation, which is in addition to the 2 signs that would, with a strict interpretation of the code, already meet the maximum number of signs permitted.
But you do calculate signage on linear feet
It's based
of the text.
on the per awning amount, so we'd add them up. Essentially 3 new signs on that side.
Commissioner Biggs? Okay. The issue, Sandra, the issue is not the awnings. They could put the awnings up. The reason we're discussing is the writing on the awnings, correct?
Generally, yes, although design review is before you, so you need to find that the awnings are in keeping with the style of the building and compatible with the site as a whole, that they are a positive design element, which I think we can.
Very good. Thank you. All right. The applicant? wanna-
Hello, I'm Tim Kelly. So I think Sandra did a good job summarizing everything. Our issue for a while now, and I think just this is, as Sandra knows, is something that I sent her a while back and just have been a little tied up with other things. So we've been wanting to get to this, but from an approach off of Madison, we felt that the business really lacks, some vibrancy. And when we built the wine display that ended up covering the windows, we knew we would lose that transparency. And so since then, we've been thinking about ways to kind of bring about, sort of a sense of like, there's something there. I mean, we still have people a year and a half or 2 years almost into it that are, didn't know we were open and stuff. So I think the awnings give a really good sign that something new is there, along with the new restaurant that just opened up. So I think it's just, overall, I feel really excited that it brings some freshness to the property, it brings some visibility. It's that simple. You're driving up and you get it right away that like, oh, this is, they have coffee, they have, we're selling wine. Right now, the main indicators, once if you're getting gas, you see in there and see that there's retail wine there, but otherwise people might not know that and they might drive right by. So from a business standpoint, we thought it was key to have the signage on that elevation.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Kelly, can you just tell us in general how it's going for you and your business? And in
Really
general,
well.
Are you on target? And would
Yeah, no,
this-
we're
these
at our
awnings and
second
promotion be an advantage to you to promote your business? And
Yeah, well, part of this, and sort of internally, the wording kind of evolved in terms of the signage, and part of it's because how well the wine sales have been. In terms of how the business functions, there's a lot. We knew there'd be a learning process because it's a pretty unique model, and the gas side of it has a real thin margin, and we're kind of up against the wall in terms of when things rise and how that works. So. The wine sales have been a real, we knew that was going to be a key component. And then the other key component is the coffee, which from early on we had a nice steady, flow of regulars who were looking to not maybe wait in line at Bouchon or other places like that. So, and we tried to keep it really straightforward. And it's been really a treat to kind of get the coffee thing going. So these 3 really sum up the business, and then there's the ancillary things as well. We have a great beer selection.
thank you for your efforts. I think everybody in town is thrilled to have a gas station in town. So
Yeah.
whatever we can do to support you, I think we're here to do that.
Great. Well, thank you. I think this would be a big help.
Good. And I just have one question. You did say you have every intent of putting up that the sign, the double-sided one on the north side as well? That's in the lower
Yeah,
basement.
I would like to. We kind of, just for budgetary reasons, did the one, and now that we're doing this, it's, you know, I checked with Sandra just to make sure we could still do it, and I would like to do it. I need to kind of make sure, you know, in terms of our budget and everything for the gas station, that we, you know, we can swing it, but I'd like to, yes.
Very good. Any other questions?
Have you considered, instead of fueling station, maybe snacks or another descriptor of
We have,
of
actually.
what else is in that store?
Yeah, craft beer was one of the ones that we thought of, and if the council felt that was more a better fit, I think we'd be open to that. So
I think to staff's point, everyone knows it's a gas station pretty quickly.
yeah, no,
So
I agree.
if
Yeah,
you're going to use that space, you know, it might be in your advantage to
yeah,
not
yeah.
be redundant with it, I guess.
I think that's a good point. So if you know, like I said, if we'd be open to that, if that was something we felt strongly.
And on that side already is the large price per gallon sign, so then you know it's a filling station.
Yeah, by
Plus,
law, we have to
at
have
the
the
top
price.
of that sign, it also said Kelly's Fuels, so.
Yeah. Those, and that was kind of a thing when we initially put the signage together. There was some stuff we learned going back of like what was required to be on. There's really strict regulations on what has to be on a gas sign, like a gas price sign, and it has to say fuel, it has to say gasoline, it has to say the name of the business, and it has to have the prices like at a certain height. So those things kind of were prescribed to us, and it was like, here you go. So yeah. So yeah, we'd be open to an alternate if you guys felt like that.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'm going to assume you gentlemen don't want to make public comment on this, so we'll close. We'll close the public comment side of this, and we will discuss. So I want to make a statement, and please correct me whenever I'm wrong. We need to make a motion, have a discussion, and make a motion of this exact sign amendment changes. And whatever changes we want need to be stated in that motion, or if this is just perfect as it is, make a motion that this is fine to move forward with this,
Correct.
correct? Very good, thank you. So with that said, who would like to have start? What's that?
I should have done that last time.
So, who would like to start? Shall we start?
I think it's a nice addition to that side of building. I think I liked tying in the yellow color. Makes it seem like more of a complex with the same yellow color as the umbrellas. I think it's pretty obvious it's a fueling station, and I think it says it more than enough times. So I like the idea of adding the other amenities that they offer, and I would either go with eliminating the filling station sign and having two signs, or your idea of adding a third would be an option too.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a nice design. I have no problem with the commercial copy. I think that, I think the recommendation by staff to not be redundant with the fueling station is a good suggestion. And I would, if I'm you, I would take that under consideration. And I like the color, and I agree with that. It kind of ties the whole block together. So I have no problems the way this looks here, other than maybe the suggestion of changing the middle sign to something other than fueling station.
Commissioner Gibbs, all the same? And I just want to make one comment too, is that I agree with what the commissioner said. There was an issue raised in this about avoid excessive signage and clutter. And on paper, I agreed with that, but once I wrote over there and my credit card clicked off at a specific point, I was able to walk around and take a look. In this case, I don't see that excessive signage and clutter with this situation. So, with all that being said, would someone like to make a motion?
Propose we approve these list outlined by Sandra.
So the outline being that we changed the filling station name to some other amenity, is that correct?
Some flexibility.
building would be good.
Okay. So I'll restate the motion then. Well, the motion is to accept the sign plan as presented with the change of the wording for the filling station awning. Is that correct? Excellent. So that motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
And that motion includes design review for the awning.
Excuse me, correct. Then the awnings are acceptable as presented as well. Very good.
I'll second that.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Very good. Thank you. Just come up to the mic if you do, just so everyone at home who's not here can hear.
Is there another review once we communicate what the other verbiage would be then for the third awning? Or can we just settle it right here?
I think we can settle it right here. You mentioned
Craft beer?
Craft beer, and I didn't hear any objections to that.
Okay.
So I think that would.
Good idea, Mike.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Now we'll move on to our second presentation for master development plan for Stuart Cellars on Washington Street. Sandra?
Okay. So tonight you have before you a master development plan application for the Stuart Cellars project out in North Washington. And these show existing photos of the site. It's a large 21,000 square foot parcel on North Washington. And it's developed with the former McGrath garage shown in the top photo. And it's noted that the garage encroaches into the town's right-of-way by 2 feet. I'd like to correct a misstatement in the staff report that indicated it was a 12-foot encroachment. The lot is also home to the former hot air balloon office that's to the south and behind the garage, a shed, a carport, some perimeter fencing, and the site also has a 43-inch DBH Valley Oak on a portion of the property and a 28-inch Douglas fir that's actually also located within the right-of-way. Surrounding the property, as you can see here in the vicinity plan, are commercial uses to the north and south with Ponchas and Jessup Cellars, and then 6 residential parcels to the sides and rear of the property, and those are accessed from Jefferson or Padrone Streets. So the proposal is a complete redevelopment of the property. All structures and paving will go. Only the heritage oak will be retained. And you can see here the footprints for the 3 new proposed buildings. One is the cafe building, and this is located closest to Washington, set back 10 feet from the front property line. It's a 692 square foot building. It's 1 story and 20 feet tall. The tasting room and apartment building is the largest of the structures at 3,290 square feet, and it's a 2-story structure with a ground floor wine tasting use and a 2nd floor apartment at the rear of the structure. It's the building located closest to the south property line, and the first 64 feet of the building, measured from the east elevation, abuts the Jessup property, and that's a commercial property. The last 23 feet of that building abuts a residential property on Padrone Street. The building setback is generally 5 feet for this building. However, there is a section that abuts the Jessup property that's set back 3 feet 3 inches. It is a 29 foot tall structure that has varying roof heights. The first 1/3 is the lowest at approximately 23 feet. And this part of the building is a 1-story portion, but it has a very high indoor ceiling height, which is the reason it goes to 23 feet. The next 1/3 of the building is the tallest at approximately 29 square feet, and the last 15 feet of the building steps back down to 23 feet 7 inches. The reading room and bookstore is the 3rd building, and it's a 1-story, 1,423 square foot structure, and it's located south of the parking lot and north of the central courtyard. The proposed FAR for the project site is 26% for the commercial portion and 4% for the residential portion, for an aggregate total of 30%. The design of the site relies heavily on the use of natural stone, and that is another correction in the staff report where I mentioned it was manufactured stone. It is a natural stone that's been selected, and it's used on the gable wall ends of the building and then for the full cafe structure at the front of the building. And I also want to point out that the applicant has brought material sample board for your review tonight. Other design elements include the standing seam metal roof, vertical wood siding on the wine tasting room and reading room buildings, and metal windows and doors, several of which are accordion style, which will open the building wide to the outdoors. And you can see here the cafe building features a set facing Washington. There's also a set on the back side of the building. There's also a steel trellis that connects the back side of the cafe building with the front side of the wine tasting room. The site relies heavily on the use of open space and courtyards, and these represent 27% of the project site. One is the central courtyard with the cafe on one side and the parking lot on the other, and it's the main courtyard. There's another courtyard that's beneath the oak tree on the north end of the property, and a third courtyard in front of the wine tasting room on the south side of the property. Driveways and parking are proposed, and you see a 20-foot wide driveway on the north side that provides access to a 17-space parking lot in the rear. There's also proposed a 3-foot tall gate at the mouth of the driveway that would be open during business hours, but with the option of being closed when the business is not open. And presented are 20-foot tall driveway and parking lot lights that at the perimeter of those features. Proposed is an 8-foot tall CMU wall on the south property line and abutting each of the residential properties, and that would transition to an 8-foot tall wood fence adjacent to the Ponches property. And the last improvements consist of frontage improvements on Washington, new 7-foot wide sidewalk with curb and gutter, 7 new pull-in parking spaces that continue the design used at Jessup Cellars. There's 2 new streetlights proposed on either end of the property and a new street tree. And so the project generally conforms to the requirements of the zoning ordinance and design ordinance, and we are definitely in support of the proposal submitted by the applicant. They are seeking several exceptions, and exceptions are permitted for master development plan properties such as this, where they are necessary to further the goals of the design ordinance. So I'm going to go into each of these exception requests separately, and they should be items that you discuss when we turn it over to you for further discussion. One relates to the FAR for the property, and as I mentioned, they're seeking proposal for 26 FAR for the commercial portion rather than the 25% maximum that's permitted. But it is noted that the site total at 30% is well below the maximum 40% that would have been allowed if they'd maximized the residential portion. And as I noted in the staff report, the actual square footage for the commercial structures is at 21%, and the reason we see a total FAR of 26% is because of the space in the tasting room in the 1-story section that has a very tall ceiling, so that anything over 16 feet from floor to ceiling is considered an assumed second floor, and it's counted for FAR purposes specifically. So it does apply to the 1-story section, even though it doesn't all consist of usable floor space. And staff can give its support to this 1% increase in the FAR because of the aggregate total and the way the site is laid out. Another requested exception is for building size. And then the Old Town Commercial Zoning District, new construction shall consist of multiple small buildings rather than one large building, and no building shall exceed 2,500 square feet. In this case, the wine tasting room building is a 3,380 square foot structure, so it does exceed that amount. In this case, staff also lends its support to the size of this building, and some of the things we're looking at are the way the site is designed as a whole. The oak tree is retained and preserved as a significant site feature. We do see 3 buildings on the site, and they're presented in a campus-like environment around the courtyards and open space that have heavy focus on this plan. And the wine tasting room building is set back 37 feet from the front property line, and it's on this east-west axis, so the narrowest part of the building does face the street. So all of those go toward mitigating the larger size of this building. And in staff's opinion, it's still within the intent of the rules for the Old Town Commercial zoning district. Another exception sought is as to building height, and that's for the wine tasting room building. One-story building sections, portions of the building shall not exceed 20 feet, and the applicant is seeking a 23-foot height for the one-story section. And staff can lend its support to this as well. While the building does have 1- and 2-story portions and the front is subject to the 1-story rule, the building really reads as a 2-story structure, and as a 2-story structure, it's within the maximum 30-foot height limit. It's generally a foot under, and it does have 2 sections that reach a height of 23 feet. And it's these different roof lines at different heights that mitigate some of the mass, especially at the front of the street where we see the lower roof line. And then the other 2 buildings are 1-story, so we're getting the variety of building heights and roof lines that are really envisioned for this zoning district. Another exception sought is for the front setback, and for buildings that are over 18 feet in height, there shall be a front setback of 20 feet from the front property line, and the west elevation is set back just 10 feet from the property line. And staff does note, however, that the roof line at 18 feet is set back approximately 19 feet from the property line, so the roof line goes back on the property. And recently, when the town council approved the Heston project, it did approve a reduced front setback, and the goal was to create a pedestrian-friendly environment and to have the building closer to the back of sidewalk, and we see a similar proposal presented here. When you consider the width of the sidewalk in front of this property, the west building face is set back 17 feet from the front edge of the sidewalk, and that's compared to a 12-foot setback at the Heston property. So it is rather similar. Also, the cafe building represents 30 linear feet of frontage on a parcel that's 100 feet wide, and so that's really a small amount of building frontage we're looking at. And the other 2 buildings are set back at significantly greater distances. As I mentioned, the wine tasting room building at 37 feet and the bookstore at 63 feet. And in addition is the fact that existing conditions on Washington Street place the building line closer to the street. Both Ponchas to the north and Chichio's to the north of that have the buildings themselves that are located within the right of way. So that creates the sense of space when you're on the sidewalk. So we find that the reduced setback for the cafe does serve important purposes in the Old Town Commercial Zoning District, where pedestrian orientation is so important, and a specific policy for that district. The next item for discussion are the side setbacks, and that's the side setback on the wine tasting room building. And as noted in the staff report, side setbacks are determined as part of the master development plan process. There is not a minimum setback requirement. It's looked at on a case-by-case basis, so there isn't an exception sought for this, but it is something that you should consider when approving the project. And the south setback is generally 5 feet from the building is generally 5 feet from the south property line. However, it has that one section that's set back 3 feet 3 inches, and that's at Jessup. And it's really the last 23 feet of the property that abuts the residential parcel that is staff's only concern. But the building height is stepped down as we go further east on the building, and it reduces in height between 29 feet to 30 to 23 feet, and that's where we have the 5-foot setback. So you're asked to look at that issue. Another issue for consideration is the oak tree, and the oak has been retained as a significant site element, and the goal is to preserve the health and have a successful retention of that tree. We did have the town arborist review the proposed plan, and he raised some concern with the amount of paving beneath the oak tree, the location of some irrigation and some plants, and he is making recommendations that the sand pavers be eliminated for a portion beneath the drip line, most notably in the 10-foot distance from the trunk. And staff knows that there are other projects in town that have used the sandset pavers when trying to retain and preserve an oak, and the result has not always been positive. We have lost trees in town, even when arborists have been involved and efforts have been taken to try to minimize the efforts. So we need to recognize that the oak is sensitive, and while we're in the design phase, this is the time to work through some of the issues. Of course, also to have heavy management of any work underneath the tree during construction as well. So we ask that you discuss this item in detail as well. The parking lot and driveway pose a few more issues for consideration, and while the parking lot and driveway meet the minimum requirements, there are issues for consideration. One is with regards to the gate that's at the mouth of the driveway, and the concern that a gate will give the perception that a parking lot at the rear is not accessible or usable even when these are open, and it could serve as a deterrent. So we're suggesting that the gate be pushed back 20 feet, so it's not that the first image of the driveway at the back of sidewalk, and also so that it could allow someone trying to pull in on the property when the gate is closed, an area to pull in and back up so they're not blocking the sidewalk. We're also encouraging that the applicant use directional signage at the street frontage advising drivers of the lot in the rear, and we found that this can be very helpful on commercial projects with Summerston as an example, Redwood Restaurant and North Block are another example. We found that the lots are not heavily used, and whether it is drivers choosing to park on the street or whether they're not aware. So a small tasteful sign that directs drivers we think is very important. The other item mentioned in the staff report are the significant areas of impervious surface that are proposed. We see not just the building footprints, but also a lot of the courtyard and site paving. And one of the considerations for driveways and parking lots is that large impervious surfaces are discouraged. So we would encourage the applicant to look at some different impervious design options. The last issue is the parking lot lighting, and it's proposed on 20-foot tall poles. And so the fixtures and the lamps themselves will be visible from the surrounding residential properties, of which there are many. So we are suggesting they lower the height of those poles so that they're no taller than the fence. And this is a very similar treatment that was used at Summerston and Heston to minimize the impacts where commercial properties back up to residential properties. And I do want to mention the trash enclosure. I didn't mention it in the staff report, but it is enclosed rather than being roofed. And we do have a food serving business here with a cafe, and also widen food pairings with the tasting room. So in such cases, we require that enclosures be roofed to control odor issues, especially where they back up to residential properties. So that's a change we'd like to see as well. The staff is very supportive of this project, and we recommend that you make a motion to recommend approval to the town council. Your recommendation should include specific direction as to each of the exceptions that are listed on the last page of the staff report. And we would ask that you also include specific direction as to issues raised by staff, and those include the landscape and hardscape improvements under the oak, alternate permeable paving options, the height of the driveway and parking lot lighting, and then the gates at the driveway entry. So I'll turn it back to you, and I know the applicant is present to give a presentation as well.
Thank you, Sandra. Any questions from the commissioners?
Just a quick question. Would you clarify for me or us the difference between the property line and the right-of-way line? Are they the same?
Yes. So the town owns the property up to the property
the
line, and then
property
it
line,
transitions. In this case, the pull-in parking and the sidewalk would be located in the town's right-of-way,
Property.
whereas on some commercial properties, that's located on the property itself. So that's a line that can vary.
So the setback we're talking about for the cafe is property line, right-of-way, same. It's
Correct.
Still 5 feet. Thank you.
Question about the side setbacks. Did I miss what is the required?
There is no minimum requirement.
no
It's to be determined on a case-by-case basis for master development plan properties.
So there's no requirement that it'd be wide enough for such and such to get down the side yard next to the building or anything?
Correct.
Okay.
We have some properties in town, like Piazza Quercia and the south side of the Summerston Wine Tasting Room that is a 0 lot line. It's where 2 commercial properties meet. Where we've had commercial properties back to residential properties, there's been a requirement for a greater setback. And Heston is an example there, where it's a minimum of 5 feet and the second story transition steps back to, I believe, 8 feet. And it's when you have a tall building, 30 feet in height, right next to a smaller scaled residential parcel.
Once you get within 5 feet to the property line, you have stricter fire separation requirements.
As far as construction? Okay. And those are met in this case?
Those haven't been looked at in
Okay.
Well, they
full detail, but
For
they
the
would
part
have to
that's
be
3.5
met.
feet.
have one wall that's 3 feet 3 inches. And that 3 inches actually gets them beyond 3 feet is the cutoff for fire rated walls and no unprotected openings.
And here we don't see any openings on that elevation,
Right.
the lower illustration.
Okay.
Have we heard anything from the east setback neighbor? Is there any concerns
No.
from the neighborhood regarding the east setback? The rear of
Well,
the building?
since this is before you in an advisory capacity, it wasn't noticed for a public hearing, so it doesn't get noticed until it goes to town council.
And did
So
you
they
guys
are
have?
probably, they may not be aware that there is a project.
Okay.
at
Do
this
you
point.
have any concerns about that?
To
from
the
an-
east side?
Yep. I guess we're talking about this, the right side of this graph here on the lower. Would I assume that's where the
Okay,
neighborhood would be?
so the lower elevation is the one that faces south, and the last 23 feet of that building does back up to a residential property. I can say that it is close at 5 feet, and it is a tall building, although there has been an effort to step it back. So perhaps, yes, there's some concern.
And there's windows, and there would be lighting coming out of the windows at night. And that would be above the 8-foot fence. Is the 8-foot fence a requirement, a required material and height?
It's a requirement that's come out of the case-by-case review when commercial properties back up to residential ones. The 8-foot height for, to project lighting and visual impacts, and then sound attenuating construction to block any noise that's possible.
That would be a masonry, not a wood.
And homeowners will have input on that.
Any other questions? So we'll hear from the applicant on this.
Me, James Stewart. Nice to meet all of you. So I'm representing my family. My father started our wine business, Stewart Cellars, back in 1999. We're a family from Texas. And basically, he has wrangled the whole family into the wine business over the years. And in 2006, I joined, and then about 2 years ago, my sister joined. And originally, we just started out making a couple hundred cases of wine every year, and now we've grown into about a 15,000 case winery. And you know, as you know, part of survival, I guess, in the wine business is to have direct retail sales. And so we saw an opportunity to buy a piece of property here in Yountville, which, you know, obviously major wine and food area for the Napa Valley, and decided that we wanted to build a tasting room. Fully knowing that, you know, there are requirements to have retail that has to do with something other than wine, we have decided to build a cafe and a bookstore, basically trying to stay within a realm of things that we're interested in. So part of, you know, originally when we bought the property, we did an assessment of what was currently there to see if there was anything that we could save and use. There really wasn't an existing structure on the property that was in good shape to continue using. We had an arborist come out and look at the tree. It's worth noting that that arborist had told us that that tree is actually unsafe and that people should not be under it. If you were to go look at the tree, there are no roots on one entire side of the tree, and there's a giant crack running through one of the major limbs. Despite that, we did meet with the town arborist, and he has looked at it with us and independently and said that the tree is actually in good condition and can be saved. And so we made an effort to design our tasting room and our two retail concepts around the tree to ensure that that tree is kept in good condition. We also wanted to make sure that we kept the property as open to the public as possible, made it sort of a series of courtyards and open spaces for people's enjoyment, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. And let's see, what else can I tell you? Anthony, am I missing anything? Okay. Some of Sandra's concerns, though, that front fence, we do plan on moving it back. The paving underneath the tree, we're open to changing that to save the tree. As I said, we have an investment in it, so we'll do what we can to keep it safe. The apartment on the property is not for, you know, we're not going to be renting it out. It's actually for private use because most of the family lives in Texas, so they need a place to stay. The windows that you were mentioning on the back of the property, those are residential windows as well. The back of the larger building that backs up to the neighbors. And then that's pretty much all I can say so far. In terms of design elements, I think it's best to have Anthony from Arcanum come up here and talk to you about those. Do you have any questions for me so far?
Anyone?
Nope?
I have
Okay.
one question, I
Okay.
guess, and I don't know how
Sure.
pertinent it is, but the cafe and book store, those are for general purpose use. That's anybody that's not tasting wine can come there.
Oh, yes.
From a neighbor to somebody out of town.
Oh yeah, of course. So all of the buildings are pretty open. So as you can tell, the cafe, which is the front building there, those doors open, and there are doors opposite of that also open. So you can see straight through the entire property all the way to the parking lot. And that cafe, the proposed hours are about 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Not to say that we'll stay open that late, but we're trying to get a good range there, and we'll be serving coffee, pastries, mostly I guess curated from local bakeries and such. The bookstore itself, open to the public, similar hours. It opens a little bit later. You can go in there, buy a book. You can just read a book. You don't actually, and you can basically sit indoors or outdoors. There are two fireplaces, one inside, and then there's an outdoor patio, covered patio as well. So the primary function is a bookstore and cafe.
You're going to get bombarded by a bunch of mommies with strollers. Just
That's
FYI.
okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Anthony Anthony Fish with Arcanum Architecture. And, this is Chris Canny with Arcanum Architecture also. Chris has in hand the material palette that we're proposing. I wanted to start just with a brief discussion on what the thought process was of the design and how we got to where we are. In wanting to save the oak tree, and we decided to make it a crucial part of the architectural language and also a crucial part of the partie of the property. As James indicated, we did create a number of courtyards around the oak tree, and the concept was not only to create some outdoor space, but also to make it like a living room or another room in addition to the built structure. So all the landscape and ideas that we invested into the landscape was to also create these courtyards as a function of a ante-room to the interior structure. And with that being said, we also created, the idea was to create almost like a little village of small buildings with maybe a larger one anchoring them. As you can see on the elevations, the concept was, okay, what if there was, 18 buildings from 1800 on the site, and some of what was left were these stone veneers, these stone ruins, and we came in and kind of infilled in between them. And that was the general concept in siding the building and creating the architecture, where we were kind of bookending the buildings and creating and infilling in between it with like a wood siding and standing seam metal roof in between these warm stone veneers. And I think the concept, in my mind, is a very interesting one and very successful one, where you have the idea of these, some of them are more traditional in terms of look like this front one, where it's all stone, and then the other ones, as you transition back into the site, there's stone facades with the wood infill. The site was also designed in mind with keeping the buildings on center with the courtyard. So we're employing some classical ideas, but also trying to keep in mind that we're kind of toggling in between an agrarian area and a retail area. And that is really one of the reasons why we tried to push the cafe closer to the street, in order to engage the street and also to bring the courtyard that it centers on closer to the street. And as you transition back into the property, it becomes a little more private, a little more quiet. But we wanted to be able to activate the street with that cafe and the courtyard next to it. That's it in a nutshell. You can see the pavers down here. This is the cobble, the pavers, the barricade, some of the metal we use for the storefront. This is the stone for the building, and then this is the stone for the building. This is the wood for the building also, and that's the stone that's proposed for underneath the oak tree that's going to be sand set. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Can you explain the water feature?
Sure. The water feature, if you look at the site plan, there's two water features. One water feature is on the front of the building, on the front courtyard. So it's centered on the cafe, and it also helps to anchor the courtyard and creates a little bit of coolness in a hot summer day. The second water feature runs down the middle of the center courtyard, and that is flush on the ground, and it's a bronze plate that has holes in it, and water just kind of seeps over it and creates this trickle effect. So you can walk right over it. It's not recessed in the ground, and then so the water trickles over it, and then it goes down into like a little 1/8-inch reveal. The idea is that if we do something there that we need to turn it off, it's a completely flush and safe safe way to do it. But in the summertime or in the winter, when we want to turn it on, it kind of creates this idea of transition through the property and then ending up or starting at the courtyard. So it was, hope that answers your question.
It does. It seems
It's supposed to be a little poetic.
It's beautiful. It would just be odd to be walking across the courtyard and step in a puddle. That's really a fountain.
Yeah. But
Okay.
it's a linear feature. It's not,
I think it looks nice. I just couldn't figure out how it worked. Okay.
Any other questions? Of the applicant in front of us?
Well, I guess you'd mentioned the pavers around the oak tree.
Yes.
Can you talk more about your plans for the oak tree?
sure. Do we have other? We're trying to be very sensitive to the oak tree, and I completely agree with everything that's been said. And so we'll take into account anything that needs to be done to continue the life of the oak tree. I mean, as you can see, it's a very important part of our design. So what we were proposing to do is to sand set these pavers. And the idea was to sand set, instead of doing bonded pavers, we would sand set them and let the water run in between them in a permeable fashion. It's definitely more permeable than what we had recommended, but not as permeable as it sounds like what the arborist might want. So we're open to suggestions and opinions. So
Thanks.
So, nothing gets anybody to a meeting in this town. There's three words. One's dog park, the other is oak tree. And so I've got some questions.
Sure.
So this arborist has made 13 recommendations. And his recommendation is not to have the sunset pavers, but to do a deck. And that's one of 13. Have any of these been addressed or discussed? I mean, we've got issues with the neighbor's tree. We've got issues, according to the town arborist, we've got issues with the neighbor's tree. We've got issues with the branches over the cafe. Have any of those other issues been addressed or discussed? Step up so everybody can hear you at the microphone.
We just got the arborist report last Thursday.
Okay.
So we haven't really had a full, opportunity to really go over all these options. I will say that just personally looking at the pavers down below that are suggested, I would prefer not to use them. So we're definitely open to other options. In terms of a deck, though, I know that there are some concerns with being, is it ADA compliant? Is that correct, Anthony?
well, I think I would much aesthetically, and I want to be sensitive to the oak also, but I would prefer to do, let's say, gravel than a deck there. The deck is not congruent with the design concept, but I think we would definitely be open to, some kind of gravel as opposed to the paver there. And in terms of the other items, we, like James said, we just haven't had time to touch on them, and those will be something that we would definitely take very seriously and look at.
Because they will come up.
Yep.
They will come up at the town council without a doubt. There's no question.
I will mention as far as his recommendations of removing irrigation and landscaping within the 10-foot radius, so that has been addressed. There were some caveats he had in there about looking at, where do the actual limbs interact with the ridge line, and those we need to explore. But with regards to the landscaping elements, we'll comply with everything he said as far as rerouting of irrigation, and I think we're open to the impervious, working with the impervious area. So we've worked with the landscape architect to kind of redo it, kind of pull back all the landscaping, get it out of the 10-foot drip radius, go with the mulch at the base of the tree rather than the copper that was originally proposed. And like I said, work with a more impervious ground surface, and then obviously explore the concerns with the limbs themselves. We're aware that there are recommendations of supports and propping up some of the defects in the tree. So we will definitely get into those things.
Thank you. So then, does that also include the impervious surface on the driveway as well and making that pervious? Because does not, and I bring it up now because it's going to come
Yeah.
up when you come in.
Yeah.
Does it not include, does it not include the whole,
I think we need to look at it through the eye of this report,
okay.
basically.
Let me ask you this then. As a non-architect here, I see the huge driveway of Bardessono that's totally pervious, that the rains can run into and underground. Why would, for such a large area, would you choose an impervious material as opposed to a pervious?
One of the considerations we were thinking of was we talked about decomposed granite, we talked about gravel, and we were swayed away from that because there was some concern about it being dusty and dirty and tracking into the property, and we want to do wood floors, and so that was some of the thought process that went into doing something that was a little more cleaner. Now, obviously, we're going to have to balance doing something more pervious and doing something that's less clean in terms of dust and mess.
And have you discussed this, so you just got this on Thursday, is it?
Yeah.
Has your arborist, have you discussed all these issues with the arborist?
No.
Your arborist? All right, any other questions?
I'd just like to say thanks for bringing a beautiful project.
Thank you.
I mean, I think it really captures the heart of what we're looking for in that part of town, and it was a pleasure to open the package and see
And I have to
this fits.
thank you very much for acknowledging that. I have to tell you, working with the Stewarts has been a true pleasure, and they really have integrity and want to do a lot for the community and for the property.
Good to hear.
Thank you.
I have one
Please.
we didn't really talk about the height of the lighting, so I just wanted to kind of get their feedback
Please,
on
please.
what that was going to be. The pole-mounted lighting for the driveway and parking lots, can you speak to what we're going to do with it?
We'd love to bring it down, honestly.
Really like to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we were keeping within what the requirements were. We originally wanted to design them much lower.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we're in full support of that.
If I can just say, just as an aside, when I interviewed with the town council for this position, one of the questions was, what, in your opinion, is the most underdeveloped parcel in Yountville? And this was my selection, so I'm very excited about the project. Maybe to compress the process slightly, is there anything about the recommendations from the staff and the exceptions and so on that were in there that you really have a problem with, that we can't work around and come back with some more ideas? One of which is the covered refuse area, one of which is the height of the poles on the lights and so on and so forth, the things we've discussed. Is there any showstoppers in there for you?
Not that I see. No, I think they're all good suggestions, honestly.
So you got to do a little rework and come back to somebody
Seems like a
with some new
little bit.
stuff.
Yeah, a little bit,
I
but
think
it doesn't
we're
seem
about
like.
3/4 of the way there, and I think you're sensing general support for the project. But there aren't any neighbors here, and the oak tree, the neighbors and the tree, to me, are the two big things you're working against.
And I'd like to believe that once we address the arborist concerns, it's pretty obvious that we are really embracing the oak tree and building a whole project around it.
I can sense that. I
Yeah,
think
we're
you're
in full support of
cooperative.
keeping that tree alive as long as we can.
I would also say that we're eager to get started on this project. There are no sort of red flags for us or showstoppers for us in terms of the staff report. We're pretty much in agreement with everything. There aren't any major design changes, and in terms of like covering a refuse bin, I'm all in favor of that as well because I don't want to smell it when I walk into work every day. So, and in terms of taking care of the tree, this is the first day I've seen this drawing from Surface Designs, but I like what they've done here. I know that we can do more. We have talked about using gravel or DG for the driveway and parking lot. I do have concerns about that being like sandpaper on the bottom of somebody's shoe when they walk over the building. But I also understand the town's concerns. I think I would hope that today, with you guys knowing that we are in agreement pretty much with everything the staff has had to say, that, if we were able to have approval, contingent upon sort of becoming compliant with some of these things, that would help us a lot in moving forward this project so that we're not another 6 months down the road.
Good.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you
No,
very much.
thank you for your
gentlemen.
time.
Thank you very much. All right. Now we get to discuss. So we have a list in front of us, and given what they've talked to us about, what we need to focus on. And it appears that we've discussed a lot of those, although we didn't ask about the side setback. Might I ask you a question about the side setback then? What is the height at the tallest point of Heston to, not to Cindy Gates' property, but the one next to it? How tall is that building?
It is about 28 feet, I believe. But
Okay.
it features a step-back appearance on that north side. So for maybe the first 12 or 14 feet, it's at the 5-foot property line, and then it steps back to 8 feet to go up the remainder to reach that maximum height.
Okay.
So it does feature more of a step-back design than
Than this does.
Can you remind me what the height of that is on this project, the height, the property?
Is it?
This
what-
is 23 feet to portions of the building, and then 29
29 with the
overall.
with the apartment, correct?
Let me take-
area over the basement.
Let me take you to,
No, it's the apartment takes it up. Yeah.
so the top elevation here is the back of the building, and on the left-hand side, you see the different roof lines. The lower is above the apartment, the taller is above the tasting room, and one is at 23 feet, the other's at 29 feet, and then it's shown here on the top elevation toward the back. Oh, well, no, but it would be on the bottom elevation toward the right, that back section.
That's all measured from finished floor, and your finished floor is going to be almost at grade, or?
And of that full height, probably only like 10 feet or so overlaps upper residential property. Then
The
it drops
last-
down again.
The last 23 feet of the building is at the residential property, 8 feet of which is at the higher 29-foot elevation. The last 15 is at the lower 23-foot elevation.
How tall is the oak tree?
I don't know. Bob, you're good at that.
It's got to be a good 70 or so, 60, 70.
So the oak tree, we won't be going taller than the oak tree.
No. Well,
To you to that elevation, this is an idea. It
Yeah.
towers over the buildings. Although this isn't totally the scale.
like a phone pole is about 40 feet, generally speaking. Phone pole and a half.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we have our discussions? You guys discuss your notes, and then I'll take notes, and we'll bring it all back around.
I guess I'm concerned about the setback, but that would come from residents.
The side
you know,
setback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the concrete wall, but that's around in everybody's backyard, but that's also kind of not within what we've been asked to decide. And then I guess I agree with everything. The only thing that really stands out glaring to me is the exception to exceed the maximum building size of 2,500 square feet. That's a pretty big jump to 3,300 square feet. I understand Sandra's comments that, you know, there could have been more buildings on the property, I guess residential.
But isn't that the assumption that ICM tasting room could potentially be a second
No.
floor?
Not,
No,
not to
that's
the
not-
3,300.
Yeah, that's not figured into the 3,300 square feet. if we were to include that, it would be closer to 4,400
Floor, I
feet.
think you said,
But we're not suggesting that that be included.
And you're okay with everything else?
yeah. Yeah,
With the exceptions that were listed here?
sounds okay. Move the gate didn't seem to be in the written exceptions, and I agree with moving the gate
Yeah.
back. I think there's several good reasons Sandra mentioned for that. And I also agree with Sandra's comments about adding more signage.
For the parking?
For the parking and for the usage of the building, so that pedestrians walking by know that there's retail, that there's a bookstore, that there's a cafe, so that it brings out the purpose of giving it some retail usage, accentuating that.
I wanted to mention one thing about the masonry wall that borders the residential properties, and that is seen, it's a condition that's imposed by staff as a maximum mitigation, or to the extent we can mitigate car lights from the parking lot and activity in the parking lot, and a wood fence and landscaping really don't do a lot to mitigate sound, attenuate sound, but a masonry wall does. So, but we always defer to the neighbors and what they would like to have. But that's about the best we can do to mitigate those impacts. If they want something shorter and they're not bothered by it, and some of the adjacent rear yards are deep, and meaning the houses are away from that rear property line, and it may not bother them, they may rather have a shorter wall, and that would be something we would look at.
Personally, I wouldn't want a sound wall, a giant concrete sound wall.
Correct, but if I, being the nosy neighbor I have, I've seen most of these backyards, and don't most of them already have wood fences with probably a 2-foot lattice on it? So with that,
They wouldn't be tearing those down.
right,
They would,
and so you'd still see the wood fence in your
That's fine,
backyard
yeah.
as well.
That makes sense.
I would believe that the majority of these have that as well, so it's not like it becomes your fence.
good. Okay,
Okay.
that makes sense.
All right.
Love the project. Great use of space, in my opinion, and I appreciate the offerings to the local community in terms of the cafe and the bookstore and the courtyard and open space. I live on that end of town, so I appreciate that. Love the report from staff. I basically will make this pretty easy. I pretty much would agree with everything that the staff, I couldn't find anything that I disagreed with staff. I agree with some of their exceptions. I agree with the arborist report, town arborist report. I think we need to take that way more seriously, and it doesn't sound like you're objecting to that, so I agree with that. I would just ask one other question, or just throw it out there, that my biggest concern with this project at this point, looking at what they did with Heston, is the height of the building. It's just really high, and Heston's almost shockingly high to me personally. I'm not an architect or design guy, but it's just a little bit out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood or the street. So what I would suggest or throw out there to you guys is, if there's a way to move the one bedroom over the bookstore and kind of create a little bit less massing against neighbors, that would be, yeah, and I don't know if you can. I should have asked this question a few minutes ago, but and maybe you want to do some late night reading, and you can take that nice little elevator down to the first floor. So those are my comments.
Well, I think we have a super project here. I'm really excited about it, and obviously a cooperative development team, which we appreciate always. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll echo the comments about what a great job Sandra and the team has done there for us. Appreciate that. And as long as we can cooperate with her suggestions and the arborist and work all that in together and address those before you go to the next level, I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. So I echo the side setback concern, given the fact that we had the Heston discussion so recently. That's my main concern of what's not listed. I'll be more than happy to make a motion if it makes it all easier, being I've been taking notes. Yeah, and here they are. So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of this project based on all 7 exceptions that have been stated. I would like to note 2 concerns, though. The side setbacks and the arborist report need to be discussed at for further discussion. But we all recommend this approval project, so I make that motion. All approve? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Very good. Thank you.
Good luck with the project.
Yeah.
Good.
Mr. Stewart, where are your vineyards? I have not. Okay. Sure.
Sure. It's exciting. Oh,
Good luck.
Please turn it up big.
Okay, and we'll chat about the report.
You will.
We know you will.
Oh, all right, well, that really worked well, giving
think
a
so.
formal recommendation and a clear consensus on those items, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're off to a good start with that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you all embraced it, so.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. All right, so on to staff and board reports. It appears that the ZDRB offices are almost set and ready to go out on the lawn, so when do we take over?
Right, this is our last meeting in the council chambers. We will be moving out of this building next week, and we'll probably not be moving back in until October or November. So in the meantime, we'll be having our meetings down at Community Center and Community Hall, the largest room there. And that's just where we'll be meeting from here on out. We already have an item on the July agenda, so I can confirm we will be meeting, and I'll see you down there next month then.
Excellent.
I also wanted to mention that we've just posted the notice of vacancy for the 2 CDR vacancies that are coming up, and a new flyer is going out, or a folder to give notice of that. And we'd encourage that you, as members of the ZDRB, talk about it and see if you know others who share interest, and really get the word out. We want to take a more active role in trying to engage future members rather than just hoping they have interest and come see us. So get the word out there. And
Do we know if our current members are going to
Commissioner Gates, I believe.
I have not, but if called, I will serve. If somebody else doesn't step up, I will reconsider.
well, I think we have interest from 2 potential people already who have applied in the past, and it'll be their opportunity to get on the board. So.
New blood would be good. You got lots of it here. Sandra, thanks for an excellent job tonight. You really made it happen.
Oh, thank you. It was a big project. We've been waiting for a big project. We got it.
We got it. You know, you were what you asked for. There.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that that highest part of the property butts up against a renter, who I don't know if we'll even ever hear from that property owner or the renter. It'll be interesting. We'll hear from Corky and Robert, I believe. But I just thought that was an interesting aspect of that. Oh, it's on.
We're on camera.
They know. Anything else? Any comments from the commissioners?
Good job tonight.
So
I tried.
Everybody else is okay with the 3,300? So,
I was because of the whole size of the property and the way it's spread out.
And the west-east person is that so narrow, it's narrow relative to the rest of the space.
It was a concern visual.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I might do that.
And getting back to the purpose and intent of that idea is to create a cluster of buildings that are in a more village-like rather than one monolithic building. And it's in that spirit.
it's not a hard fast. This was definitely in the spirit of what you were looking for, so there's a little, yeah.
And the master development plan process is unique in that you can approve just about any exception that seems to work for the property and the surrounding properties. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Although in this case, I think all of the ones that were asked for have value, and there was some, there was definitely some justification behind each of them.
Can I add one question, and then I'll let you guys go? Does the town arborist always have the final say, as opposed to an applicant getting an arborist or two? To be honest, I was going to ask them if they were going to get a third opinion.
Well, they've let me know that they've been in discussion with an arborist who has different opinions, so in
She
that...
brought up.
Mhm. They just haven't presented anything in writing, which we've been asking them
Okay.
to do. So there can be an evaluation by the decision makers that there are multiple points of view, that our town arborist has these recommendations. I was happy to hear they want to incorporate a lot of the measures into their plan, but they are very committed to their design aesthetic and what the overall look is. So they weren't willing to do some of the more, dramatic changes that our town arborist wanted. I'm hoping in the end we can come to, a reasonable agreement as to what's done.
Yeah, his suggestion of the deck is to get it off grade, and that it, surprisingly enough, it's the compacting around or changing grade around the oaks has a lot to do with, there's an exchange of gases through the soil, oxygen. It's not just water and irrigation. And so you got to be kind of careful when you start, even those sand joints, depending on how big the joints were. And I think what our arborist is suggesting is just get all that traffic off to begin with and build it up to where it's can breathe through the deck. Because, when you think about it, in our water table, the roots of that oak are down in the water table. It's not so much the water, it's letting it breathe.
Is there a way to make that just environmentally sensitive area that they cordon off? Say no,
Bill, our consultant, is consulting arborist. He is, I rely on his judgment, professional judgment quite a bit, and if he's okay with that solution, or I think whatever they come up with has to get peer reviewed by Bill, and we'll let you know.
And, he didn't rule out entirely the pavers. He just wanted to see some change. His ultimate solution was the raised deck, but he was willing to consider the other. So I think if they can meet what Bob just mentioned, the concerns about compacting the root zone and providing the oxygen, it might be a solution that works.
I just think the raised deck might be invite the rodents and things to live under it, but the question, when this comes up to the town council, is it coming up to the next month?
We have it tentatively scheduled for July 16th. It all depends on how seriously they take your recommendation to step back the building on the south elevation, because that'll lead to some pretty big design changes. Yeah. So that might make it so that it's pushed back till August, but I think we're going to see it either July or August. They, of course, have been working on it for 3 years, but now they're raring to go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, with that being said, we make a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
All
Yes.
right. Who would like to do that?
So moved.
Very good. And second. Perfect. Very good. We're adjourned to
Good job. I think
July
it was a really
9th.
great meeting.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was expecting this slow.
I was.